So here I am 40 and I realized dad was my abuser. How awesome that God showed me my dad's redemption before he showed me his depravity.
Welcome to Radical Abundance. I'm your host, Teresa Janzen, and today I have with me Susanne Moore. She is an abuse and recovery coach. She's a blogger, a writer, a single mom to 2 amazing kids and 3 even more amazing grandkids. Welcome, Susanne.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, and I'm excited to have you here too. You and I have had a chance to spend some time together in the past, and I can't wait for the Radical Abundance audience to hear more about what you have to say. This month, we are talking all about God's radical abundance of freedom. And I know you have an amazing story of being set free, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But first, I have another question for you. Susanne, if you could be a bird or a fish, which would you rather be?
I would be a bird because I would want to fly. Although I'm a swimmer.
Ah,
Oh, that's a hard question. I am a
yeah.
swimmer. So wait a minute. But I think I've always, I think birds would have more opportunity. A fish is kind of
Oh,
confined by the water, where I think
okay.
freedom, the
All right.
bird would
And you
set you
are,
free.
yeah, and you're a woman without boundaries, right?
That is
You're all
true.
about the freedom. Yeah. Well, great. Well, we are talking about freedom. And so, okay, you are an abuse and recovery coach. What exactly does that mean? What kind of person comes to you and looking for a coach?
Sure. Um, I usually talk with women, mostly women who have been abused. I have kind of a unique story where I've been abused in a lot of different areas. So, child sexual, abuse, domestic abuse, and narcissistic sociopathic abuse. And so I have a lot of women who are trying to get out of abuse that I get to counsel with and help them try to break free of that. And then, try to help with the healing process for those who are really trying to get on the other side of it.
And that sounds like you're saying trying to get on the other side of it. To me, that does sound like just a big chasm or something huge to be able to cross when you have been hurt that deeply.
Yes, it's
Oftentimes by people that you know and trust.
well, yes, probably most of the time it's people you know and trust. My abusers were, my father and my boyfriend, and some other things have happened in my life, but most of the time it is somebody close, and that's even harder to, um, you love people, but freedom comes when you realize you can love them and you don't have to be with them to do that.
You know, the number one thing that I hear people say, um, people who are not in an abusive relationship or haven't experienced that, is they say, why not just leave? Why not just leave the relationship? And that's that we're talking about freedom, and it's really you're held captive
Yeah,
in a
you are
way.
held
So tell
captive.
us why not just leave? What keeps people from leaving?
I kind of call it a dumbing down. They kind of erase who you are. It's a slow, methodical undoing of your soul. And I think that, in the beginning, you go, oh, well, what's wrong with him? We all make mistakes. God forgives. He can change. Um, so you start that whole process, and they are very apologetic for the things that they do. I didn't mean to harm you. I'm stronger than I thought. Um, that was the main thing for mine was, you know, I'm stronger than I thought. I poked you until you bruised. I pinched you until you bled, but uh, I didn't mean to. And so I think it's just number one, you don't want to admit to the world that this person that they all love and think is great is not that person. And a lot of people don't believe you. And so it makes it extremely hard. And also, they make you feel like you can't go. Like, they're holding you captive. They will follow you. They will not let you go.
Yeah, and you talked about too that duality of you really love this person. Oftentimes, I mean, sometimes it could be an abusive situation where you don't. But when we're talking about people you know and trust, oftentimes you do really love the person and you want to believe it's going to get better. How do you process that in your mind, loving someone who's hurting you, at least in the initial stage when it's going on?
Well, depending, it can be different with different types of abuse because with childhood abuse, um, that's your parent or your uncle or somebody close to you. And that's a little different to try to love somebody. Um, and you're being trained up that way. So you have a lot of things to go through. But if it is an abusive husband or a narcissist, you discover that those people aren't actually real. You're in love with an idea. This is the person you want them to be. Um, and so you're in love with that idea. And it's a really hard concept to grasp, but they're really not that person. They're manipulators, they're controllers. Um, they do not have good things in mind for you. And they do it purposely. And that's so hard to grasp for somebody who, you've given your life and your heart to. How can that be? And, out in the public and everywhere else, they're amazing. They do amazing things. They have really great jobs. They take care of their family. So it's very, very hard. And breaking free from that um, is kind of an undoing of your soul, trying to find yourself again. Who am I? Who was I before this happened? And how do I get back there?
And I want to hear what it takes to break free and break through. But first, let me ask you, do you have any idea on average how long is it before a person actually does break free and then they're able to come to someone like you, like a coach, to actually begin to process what has happened? Do you have any?
I do have some statistics. The average woman, now I don't know a lot about men because I deal with women, but the average woman returns to her abuser 7 times before they break free.
Mm,
My hope is to
wow.
help people see that as not a possibility that you can break free. Especially in the church, it's you're not supposed to divorce, you're not supposed to do these things, and your counseling can be, you know, get him counseling. We'll help you through this, that kind of thing. And that's very hard when you love the Lord and you love your husband or your boyfriend or whoever it is. That's very difficult because you don't want to be the one that disappoints God. And
Right, right.
yeah, so that's really hard. But yeah, 7 average time they return is 7 times. And
Wow.
I returned 3 times to my abuser, the most recent one. Um, and a month or 2 before I broke free, I just thought I was going to die. I I had an undoing of my own self saying, "Whoa, how did I get here? What am I doing?" And I started reading and studying what's wrong with him. Why is he like this? What's wrong with me? Am I the one with the problem? Um, and that's when I discovered narcissistic abuse. And it is what they call hidden abuse because that's the one people don't see.
And that's the one where people usually think that the person is just fabulous because they're outgoing and charismatic and everyone loves them, right?
Yes. Yes, and you have to be
Oh,
at the place where if you're breaking free, you may lose some of those people because they don't believe you,
mm,
and that's okay.
wow.
Eventually, they'll see the light.
It does come out
It
eventually,
does.
doesn't it?
But it
Yeah,
is hard
yeah.
to think, "Oh gosh, I'm gonna lose my friends."
Yeah, of course. And you feel even more alone, at that time. Yeah. Suzanne, what is it in your experience that generally causes a person to finally get to that point of being able to break free?
Well, I think freedom's a choice, and making a choice to break free is one of the hardest choices you'll ever make. To get to that place, um, many times it's just a breaking of you. I can't take anymore. But I think that what really set me free, and I think this is a lot of women, is realizing how God sees me. My identity in Christ is 100% everything He says I'm not. And so if I'm trusting the Lord and trusting what He says about me, I have to realize that I can be free of that, and I can be free in Christ. I, I went through a lot of steps when I broke free, especially from some abusers. You have to break free in complete, you can't have any contact of any kind. Um, I called my family and said, "This is happening." They were shocked. They all had um, kind of embraced him in the family. But they all showed up at my door the very next day. My brothers changed my locks. We blocked him on every site, everything possible, and just stayed the course with me. But a lot of people don't have that kind of connection. So as an abuse recovery coach, I like to share resources. There's local places that you can go. There are shelters, there are abuse lines you can call. The police will help you. We have a hard time with that sometimes, but they will help you.
I'm so glad that we do have a society now where people are beginning to talk about it, even in the church. And I hate to say, even in the church, because the church should have been the first place we could talk about it. But thankfully, we're getting to that place now. So I have a couple of other questions for you, too. You talked about people go back. And if someone is listening to this recording right now and they're like, oh my goodness, this is me, and I was thinking about going back, what would you say to that person right now?
Um, to the person who's thinking about going back, I would say, first, I would say, don't do it. Um, you can't fix them. They're not your project. And as much as you love them, sometimes loving somebody is letting them go to face the consequences of their actions. Um, so we candy coat love as if it's a covering of all the things that we do wrong. And the truth about love, God is love. God believes in justice. God hates divorce, but he hates abuse. And he would not condone any of that. Protect yourself, protect your family. And, I promise you, God will be on that road with you. Instead of standing up as um, the victim, you become the survivor. And then you can help others survive.
And to the woman who's listening right now, who's still in the relationship, because I know there are some, and boy, finding that courage to make the choice to break free, like you said, it's one of the hardest things you've ever done. How does someone even start that process?
Well, I mean, I loved the way that I did it because I educated myself on abuse, on their actions, on what does it look like to be abused? And when you start seeing those lists and you say, "Oh gosh, that's me, that's me, that's me. That's what's happening to me." And then you can start getting guidance on how to break free. Um, the first thing, of course, is to find somebody um, who will listen. And if it's not family, that's okay. Call an abuse recovery line. Call me. I'll talk to you anytime, day or night, because I want to help you break free. Right after I'd been with my most recent abuser for 4 years. And within, I think it was 2 months, he had another girlfriend. I wasn't friends with any of them, but I had somebody message me saying, "Oh, he's already got a new girl." Didn't shock me at all, because what you find out is they're liars and deceivers. And so, this is the awesome thing that I really want to share today, is I received a phone call at work, and it was a woman, and she said, "You don't know me, but I wanted to talk to you about this person." And of course, I had the immediate anxiety and stress, thinking, "Oh goodness, why would you want to talk to me?" She said, "Well, I'm in a relationship with him, and somebody at the church where I used to go said I needed to talk to you." And I said, "Okay, well, you're probably not going to like anything I have to say. So tell me what's going on." And her children had been desperately trying to get her out of this relationship. Her children had seen the abuse. And so I was able to counsel her a little bit and say, when you do break free, we can meet and we can, uh, you know, heal together. And I got to meet her for coffee just the other day. And we discovered that he'd been dating her all the way back to 2018. He and I did not break up till 2019. So those are those stories you
Mm.
have to hear to say, okay, when he's accusing you of cheating, when he's accusing you of doing all these things, he's actually doing it himself. And it's hard to think that
Mm.
somebody can be so deceitful, but you deserve better, and you can break free. You can get out.
I love that you talked about that you had educated yourself and that you started looking at the lists of the signs, because I know from my experience, I actually thought something was wrong with me. I thought maybe I was even going crazy,
Hmm.
and yeah, and I really didn't think that it could be him. And when I did think that, then something would happen, and I'm like, oh, well, no, it must be me. Or I must not remember it right. I must have misinterpreted it. And I started really, really thinking that perhaps I was going crazy. And when you start educating yourself and looking and seeing, that's one of the signs, actually.
Hmm.
You do have to trust yourself a little bit
You do.
and get wise counsel from someone else.
What I discovered after this final abuser was that I had never healed from the original abuse. And so I carried all that with me all these years. So as a child, I was abused. And so how I gained love was through abuse. What a terrible, horrible thing. But to discover that God is love, none of those things can be that. And so to be defined through Christ, to know your identity, to choose to stand and be a survivor, and to educate others, it will open doors for you to grow and to help others. I never thought I'd be counseling an abused from the same abuser, right? How
So, Suzanne, I am wondering, there is someone listening right now, too, who has someone in their life that they're wondering about their relationships that they're in, a loved one. For me, one of my daughters was in an abusive relationship, and I saw signs that concerned me. And I would ask her, I would talk to her, and she'd say, "Oh, Mom, he's all, he's just all words and steam. There's nothing behind it." And so I put it aside, and because oftentimes he was super nice too. But there were things that just looked off a little bit. And so I'd ask her, and she'd always just deny it. And we know now that victims, that's what they do. They deny it when you ask.
Mhm.
And it's something I had to really process a lot, with where is my responsibility as a parent of an adult child in an abusive relationship who says everything's fine, Mom, and and I believed her, um, till things just went so far, that it was very clear that it wasn't fine. Um, but how do you counsel someone who has a loved one that they're concerned about the relationship? What should a person do?
Well, I think that in all honesty, you have to pray daily for them. Pray for God to open the eyes of their heart to see it for what it really is. Pray for them to have that moment where they go, okay, maybe I need to educate myself. Maybe this is abuse. And don't be silent. Even if they say, no, mom, everything's fine, they heard you. And every single time you say that, they hear you. And I think all of those are so important to be able to say, you know, mom, thanks. I know you told me. Sorry I didn't listen to you. Um, sometimes we learn the hard way. And, but I think that the more and more that we reach out and the more and more we say, that's not normal behavior. He shouldn't be doing that to you. He shouldn't talk to you like that. All of those things, I'm so sorry. All of those things help them start to see. I was pulled over a wall um, by my abuser, but he told me, they have a hero complex. So he told me that I slipped and fell. And I didn't recollect it because it broke my arm in 7 places and dislodged my bladder. And I had 5 surgeries that year. But my daughter is a nurse and she was at the hospital when I fell. And it was from that moment on that my mother kept saying, I don't like this. His behavior's not okay. I wasn't listening, but I was. You know what I mean? I kept thinking to myself, you're right. This doesn't matter. This doesn't measure up. This doesn't add up. And so once I finally got through all that trauma and all those surgeries, that's when it started to unravel. And that's when I started to say, okay, maybe there's some truth to this.
Suzanne, tell me about the freedom that you find when you do get on the other side. How is life different, even though you have a lot of challenges? Okay, single mom, that's not an easy task. But how is life different?
I discovered that single is a whole number. I'm whole in Christ. And I do not need to look outside of that until I find another whole person. The problem is we try to fill those spaces with something else. And God is our redeemer. I was able to kind of, it took a while. I had some post traumatic stress stuff that happened afterwards. I had a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear. But as God replaced that fear with, joy, and it's just a switch of your direction. Um, God is leading me. And I mean, look how he did that. He led me to help somebody who had been abused by the same person. He has led me to be able to contribute on a blog, to write. I've talked to many, many people about their abuse and what they've gone through. I mean, what a beautiful ministry to try to help others. That comes after. Scripture says joy comes in the morning. And we have a hard time grasping that, but it really does. No matter how dark, joy comes in the morning. Um, life is a life is a constant transformation. Um, so I think you have to dig into the scriptures. You have to find good counsel. You have to get help because see, all those years I thought I was handling it just fine, and I wasn't. As soon as I became vulnerable, which was when I became an empty nester, I was like, oh, maybe I could date again. I wasn't ready, but I didn't know I wasn't ready because I had just hadn't dealt with any of that before. And I just think that's the problem is we just put it back and we take care of everybody else. And we've got to heal our minds and our soul. And it's okay to ask for help.
In fact, it's imperative that we ask for help, all of us, but especially people who've been through something like that. Suzanne, I know that you talked about PTSD. Of course, there's all sorts of anxiety and depression and things that can be tied up in this. And sometimes, when, in fact, maybe even all the time, when someone's coming through this, they really need the help of a counselor before they get to the point of needing a coach, being ready for a
Hmm.
coach. Tell me a little bit about the difference between when you need a counselor and when you need a coach. How do you know when you're ready for that coach?
Um, I think, a counselor is going to help you dig really, really deep into why you made some of the choices you made, why you accept some of the behavior you do, and help you kind of get through that. A coach is going to encourage you and inspire you and ask you questions to help you open the doors for what you might want to do in the future with with all you've learned and your growth from
Mm.
actually getting help.
Yeah, I think what I've heard it is explained as is that counseling really helps you deal with those things in the past, and coaching really helps you move forward.
Yes.
And so and that's what I heard you say too. Is counseling, you're going to look back and determine all of these whys, and I think that's important because you have to process that stuff. But then you get to the point of, okay, I've been there in the past. I've processed it. And now I'm ready to move forward, and sometimes both are going on at the same time, I think. But you cannot stay in the past.
No.
And I think that's the really exciting thing about what you're doing as an abuse and recovery coach is, giving people hope. First, you're a beacon of hope yourself. You're this shining, beautiful, hope-filled person,
Thank you.
and who has survived amazing, horrendous things. I mean, incredible things, but you have come out of it so beautiful and now ready to give hope and inspiration to other people. And speaking of inspiration, you are also a speaker, aren't you? People can have you come to their women's group and share your testimony and how you did break free and give people hope.
Yes, I absolutely love to share my story, because it really helps others come out. And that's what we have to do. We have to talk about it. We have to talk about how to deal with it and what is healthy and what isn't. We have such a misconception of the truth. One of the things I really learned and so many people suffer with is boundaries. See, boundaries is freedom. And this is where we struggle. I've never had boundaries. I didn't, my parents were not around at all. My mother was drunk or working. My father was a truck driver when I was young, or he was doing the terrible things to me and my family. Um, so I had no boundaries. And so I've kinda lived that way for so long, and so I'd have all these people all the time I was helping and fixing and, all of that. What I've discovered is freedom comes when you learn to draw healthy boundaries. Um, you don't have to be a doormat. You don't have to accept those behaviors because they need Jesus. You you just don't, and boundaries are freedom. I've even been able to draw some boundaries with my own grown children where I realized maybe I don't have proper boundaries here, and I need to do that. So it's been really awesome to watch God blossom through all of that.
I know that one of the things I really appreciate about my daughter, and she also encourages people, and we've written her story in part, and we're writing it in whole. So total permission and disclosure here to share her story. Is she first of all, she says everyone needs to be in counseling and have a coach, and what she has learned recovering is such a beautiful way of having relationships that are mutually respectful. And
Mm,
she's just one of the amazing people that I know, with really great relationships with her current significant other, her children, where she has young children at home still, and she can respect and engage in her children with actual conversation, and also herself. and she can really look at herself in a healthy way. And I think that's what happens when you come through something like this. You end up so much of a more complete, whole, and healthy person
Mm-hmm.
because you have healed those things.
I
So
agree.
almost in some instances better than someone who has never been through that experience. And not that I wish people to have the experience so that they can be whole. Maybe you can get a coach without having that type of traumatic experience. So the last thing I want to talk to you about, Susan, is this issue of childhood abuse. You were abused as a child, absolutely no fault of your own, no choice that you made. You were born into this family, raised in the family, and you didn't even know what was healthy and what was not healthy. And then as an adult, it obviously had a lot of impact on you. And I have to think that today there are people who are living relatively normal, functional lives who also have a history of abuse in their childhood. And they might be tempted to say, maybe it didn't happen. Or they might be tempted to say, it doesn't matter because it was so long ago. What would you say to someone like that?
Um, Anybody who has been sexually abused or molested or whatever you would call it as a child, um, it has scarred you. And those scars do not go away unless you deal with them. They will pop up in different parts of your life, parts of your marriage, parts of your, parenting. Um, I can remember one time just dealing with my own children thinking, oh my goodness, I've become my mother. See, my mother ignored all of the stuff that was going on in our home. And so when we finally split, my parents divorced, my mother became a drunk. That's how she dealt with it. I know this because her and I talked about it before she died. Um, that, we don't understand why you would cover up something like that. And so there's so much shame and so much pain that is dug deep in your soul. And, even the way you make decisions, what you did as a teenager, all of that was based on your primary years where you were taught. And so I think everybody who has ever had that needs to find a way to deal with it. You need to go to counseling. You need to
Mm.
talk about it. I didn't know, you said that maybe they ignore it or they don't talk about it. They don't want to remember it or anything. I had a dream. I didn't know who my abuser was because God protected my psyche. Um, and I think he did it methodically. So I'll explain that. I knew I was abused. I just didn't know by who. I had nightmares until I was 40. And in those nightmares, I could see a hand coming up over the bed, but I never saw a face. So I never really knew that. So I had this really good relationship with my dad because he met Jesus when I was 14. Now, he left the house when I was 12. He met Jesus and he started sharing Jesus with us. And I had a good relationship with him, which is bizarre because he was the one who abused me. But when I was 40, I was
Mm.
just talking randomly with a person and they mentioned part of their story and it came flooding back. Everything came flooding back. Well, my dad died of a heart attack when I was 26. So here I am 40 and I realized dad was my abuser. Um, how awesome that God showed me my dad's redemption before he showed me his depravity.
Mm.
Yeah. So here's the thing that it really taught me. Um, Sexual abuse, abusive people, anything like that. God does not measure sin, and that's where we get lost. Sin is sin. Christ died for all of us. O wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death but Jesus Christ my Lord? And so if we can get to a place in our own soul that we deserve nothing but death, no matter what we've done, Christ came. Then it helps you deal with all these terrible, horrible things that go on in this world and happen to you. It doesn't condone it. Judgment is God's. And He says we will pay. So uh, I feel like vengeance does come, but it's not my place to do that. See, their problem's not my problem. The abuser's problem is not my problem. And that's, we want to fix them. We want to do these things, and we can't. And we have to come to that place too to be free.
I loved what you said earlier when you talked about that sometimes loving someone is leaving them alone to face the consequences for their action. It's not about protecting them in the midst of their depravity,
Hmm.
because they do need to come to that point where they are face to face with their Savior and have to make a choice. And that is a really gracious thing that God did. And you have such a gracious attitude about it, having come to realize who your abuser was and recognizing that you are just as lost and broken and sinful as he was,
Yeah.
and in need of a savior just as much, and God can redeem it. Now, from a very real and practical stance, though, it really is miraculous when an abuser can come to the point of redemption.
Oh, yeah.
And that is what I hope and pray. It is a miracle,
It
in
is a
my
miracle.
opinion. Suzanne, as we wrap up our time together, is there just anything else that you would like to share with our audience before we go?
What I really wanted to say is we can't control everything that happens to us. We can control how we react to it, how we will carry it, and how we will live through it and over it. Um, I want everybody to know you're not alone. You may feel alone, but I know a lot of folks who are married, who have children at home, and they still feel alone. But God's always there, and there's always somebody who will listen. Um, you just have to reach out. You can't sit in your shame. You can't sit in your abuse. It's only going to get worse. You need to speak up. You need to break free. And freedom is amazing. I want you to find freedom.
And I want everyone for sure to experience a radical abundance of freedom, because that is exactly what God has designed for us. Not just life, but life abundantly and freedom abundantly in a joy filled life.
Amen.
Suzanne, thank you so much for being with us today on Radical Abundance.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, my friend.